Yeah, did it start now? Yeah, I think it started. Yeah, just check once.
Yeah, no, not the link that we published. It's still there with the flyer.
This is showing me it's streaming live now.
Okay,
Actually.
now, yeah, now it's working. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. So should we start?
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome all to this wonderful session of Let Us Talk It. We have come down 1 year of Let Us Talk It webinar. We are very excited, and we are very much excited for the topic today, which is so appropriate, so apt for this time, and we are privileged to have a doctor joining in from UK. So going by the topic, today's topic in Let Us Talk It webinar is micro steps to help you reset and stress less. The COVID-19 pandemic is taking a toll on our emotional resilience alongside the pricing for justice and economic uncertainty. This world is in a swirl of anger, fear, and of course, hope. Spiking our stress and anxiety levels and negative impact is definitely impacting our well-being. This time has shown that we can move into a new world, maintaining our well-being and increasing our resilience, which is so important for us than ever. And today, to talk about this topic, we have with us Martika Swaby from UK, and she has over 15 years of experience in consulting, coaching, and mentoring to improve emotional well-being. She is the founder of Benevolent Health and Mind Hub Emotional Technology, a psychotherapist using her clinical expertise and digital marketing capabilities to deliver a range of online summits and training programs that increase awareness of mental health and build emotional resilience at home and in the workplace. Very rare to find such a great combination of digital marketing, of clinical health. We are so happy to have you, Martika. Over to you.
Thank you so much. What a fantastic introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I hope you guys enjoy this content. I'm going to deliver 4 micro steps to help reset and stress less. So really, I don't want to kind of talk about the really obvious things. I want to go a bit deeper, so you guys feel like you've gone away with something that you can think about and use. So today we're going to reframe mental health. We're going to look at what stress is. We're going to think about mindset and how we choose our thoughts, and then we're going to do an exercise. So you guys have to join in. I'm not going to be doing all the work. I hope that's okay. If you have a chat box, then please type okay. So let me start with my story then. So as you can see, this is a picture of an iceberg, and what you see on top is actually quite a lot. But sometimes I think with mental health, certainly with my stress and anxiety, you definitely, what you would see on top would be someone that was bubbly and very capable and always willing to help, someone that would take on project after project and keep doing. But actually underneath, I was probably feeling really stressed and burnt out. And sometimes I think that, you know, when we want to be helpful in the workplace, particularly if we are in roles where we're consulting or you know, working alone and not necessarily with a team, it's so easy to take on more than we can cope with. So as I've already been introduced, you guys know my experience and how I came to doing this work. So what do you think about when you think about mental health? What's the first things that kind of pop into your head? Just throw a few comments in the chat box for me.
Peacefulness, serenity, calm, composure, sometimes stress,
Yep.
aggressiveness,
Uh-huh.
and anxiety.
Okay, so I think that that was quite a good mix of kind of good and bad emotions. But the reality is, if you type in mental health or mental illness into Google, for example, you get back all these really negative images and pictures, regardless of whether it's mental health or mental illness. And I think that historically, if you think about how we've treated mental health, back in 2000 BC, it was seen as demonic possession, and we needed to be exorcised to, you know, to get well. And then we started building asylums, and we introduced lobotomies, so removing a front part of the brain to treat people with mental illness. And then we introduced something called electric compulsive treatment, which we actually still use today to treat severe depression. And then we introduced antipsychotics. And it's only really in the last 12 years that we've started using talking therapies and using CBT and cognitive behavioral therapy and other talking therapies. Like nowadays we're using keyboard and over Zoom to treat people. But it's only really in the last 12 years that we've started to see that talking is a therapy. And so really the mindset around mental health has really been about mental illness. And actually we all have mental health. And I think some of the comments that were made earlier in terms of serenity and peace and you know, positive things actually demonstrates that, you know, we are thinking in that kind of preventative mental health space. So when you look at the spectrum of mental health, actually only 25% of us, 1 in 4, have mental illness. And the rest of us, the 75% of us, are in a state of well-being. So we're coping or we're flourishing. And actually what we need to do is focus much more in that preventative space. So things that keep us well, like eating well, exercising, financial well-being, relationships, connection, all of these things that keep us mentally well. And if you want to read more about that from an academic perspective, there's a paper by Keyes and Huppert which talks about the state of well-being. So really today's conversation and the first hack really is the reframe around thinking about mental health as something that we all have. So actually we don't have to feel ashamed or embarrassed about it. And often I refer to this as mental fitness. So all the things that I've just mentioned around sleep and relationships and connection, etc. So secondly, stress reactions and what is stress. So you're probably all familiar with fight and flight and the idea that when you know, we get stressed, there's some cortisol that's released in our bodies, our heart rate increases, our digestion slows down, and we get ready for literally fight or flight, and in some cases freeze. And back in the day when we were, you know, we were hunting for food and we were out and needing this kind of energy, we didn't have sedentary lifestyles where we were sitting down all day. This was actually quite helpful. But when you've got stress that's building up and it's not being released, actually it makes us quite, it can tip over into anxiety and making us quite fearful, and in some cases freezing. So the other day I was watching a nature program, and there was a lion that was hunting a gazelle, and the gazelle was like running away from the lion. And I don't know if you've ever seen lions hunting prey before, but another lion in the pack will actually go forward in front and like hide to jump out on their prey. And so this lion's jumped out on this gazelle, and the gazelle, instead of carrying on running, which gazelles could easily outrun a lion, it freezes and it's stuck. And what it does is it turns round and it runs back towards the lion that's chasing it, and unfortunately gets eaten. And actually, when we are stressed, we don't think clearly. We are governed by fear, and we turn round and perhaps run into the problem or freeze. And so a common thing, particularly in remote workers, consultants, project managers who are under significant time pressure, and sometimes we can start to experience burnout. And what are the warning signs of that? So I think that we get into an exhaustion state where we start to have sleep problems, that we're perhaps forgetful, and we have chest pains, palpitations, that we might feel sick, anxious, and then we go into detachment. So once we start feeling all of these difficult feelings, actually we detach and we start to become pessimistic, isolate ourselves and feel disconnected and alone. And at that point we become ineffective, that we're not as productive as we used to be. And often it's at that point that perhaps a colleague or a manager might notice that something's going wrong. And often people fall into a place of hopelessness. So feeling depressed, lost enjoyment for their work, and just running out of gas. And I think in this pandemic where we are all stuck at home and nothing's open, we're not, well, certainly in the UK, not many things are open. It can be quite monotonous to keep going over the same things again, sort of, wake up, eat, work, sleep, and that's the routine. So it can actually make us feel quite hopeless. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that. So the second micro step is actually increasing our awareness and being aware of the warning signs and what we're seeing in other people and what we're noticing in ourselves. So I want to come on to mindset now, because I think this is really important. And when it comes to noticing signs and symptoms in ourselves or in other people, and we refer to different types of thinking, and there are 7 different types of thinking. But for today, I just want to focus on intrapersonal, which is what's going on inside with yourself, and interpersonal, how you react to other people, your relationships with other people, and what's going on externally. And actually, in these 7 different types of thinking, it's really important to create a space for yourself. I mean, if you look at some of the statistics around, stress and anxiety and how it impacts us, actually 80% of cancers are due to lifestyle and not genetics. So, we need to think about how we choose our thoughts. 75% of all primary care visits, all visits to the GP, are usually stress related. And sometimes we start to have physical pain in our bodies because of this intrapersonal space that we're not able to articulate. So remember, I showed you the picture of the iceberg, and actually, the bit of the iceberg that we couldn't see was all the things that were going on underneath, and that's the intrapersonal space. And what I really want to say about mindset and neurobiology is actually, this is our mental real estate. This is where we think. This is where our brain lights up, where we generate electromagnets and quantum neurons and all these fantastic things that go on in our brains. And I think, when you look back to the history of mental health and when it was demonized, I think that there is some reality in our mindsets, in our neurology, having some a spiritual or a soul element. And I think neuroscience is starting to catch up with this idea and recognizing that when people meditate and get into flow states, actually the electromagnets are working in positive vibrations, and we're sending good feelings around our body. And actually, when we're in a state of fear and when we're in a state of stress, this is the lowest vibration, and actually where we start to make our bodies, we start to send out toxins in our bodies and make ourselves unwell. So really, our thoughts have energy, and we can change our brain with the things that we think. So all the neurotransmitters and proteins are intricate, organized sequences of actions that actually changes our brains. So that tells us that we've got free will and it's not an illusion. You can actually influence and change your thoughts. We're not victims. We do have control over our reactions and our thoughts. So it begs the question then of what do we say to ourselves, and then how do we react to that? Because we can change and put in our minds different ways of thinking. So micro step 3 then is you are in control, and there's a really key area of working on your mindset. Certainly one of my routines waking up in the morning is, before I get out of bed, I like to think about at least 3 things that I am grateful for and that I'd enjoyed in my life all through the day, just to keep reflective. I often like to have a meditation or a prayer. I mean, everybody's different. Everyone's got a different way of doing it. But I encourage you to think about what you're thinking about, which sounds strange, but from an intrapersonal perspective, and to get underneath the unconscious, the iceberg, the bit that's underneath, we really have to listen to what ourselves are saying. So this is a bit where you need a pen and paper, or you can just visualize it. But I just want to talk about a stress bucket. And actually, if you think about a stress bucket as a container, and actually that's where we put all of the things that are making us feel stressed or feel anxious. And actually each of us have got different size containers. So some containers, some of us have larger containers and we can manage more stress, more pressure, more anxiety, and some of us have smaller containers and we can manage less. And this isn't fixed. Actually, when, you know, in our lives we go up and down within our stress buckets. And actually, if you think about a container holds onto something, and depending on the size of the container depends on how much you can hold on to. And if you think about the relationship between the mother and the baby, for example, you know, the baby cries and the mother responds to the baby. And in some ways, as managers, as leaders, as you know, colleagues, we are containers for you know, our colleagues and our friends, our family, and we're a container for their stress. So sometimes we need to be really aware of actually what's my stress in intrapersonal, and what is my colleagues or what is my family members' stress, which is external. So sometimes we need to be aware of those two, because actually sometimes we're carrying other people's stress and that impacts on us. So I want you to think about actually what's in your stress bucket and what is making you feel stressed. You don't have to share it with me, but just spend a couple of minutes just thinking about you know, what kinds of things are playing on your mind and making you feel stressed at the moment. Just give you a minute to think about that. So what needs your urgent attention on that list? What are the key priorities? I want you to just pick maybe 2 or 3 things that are urgent on that list, because sometimes we're stressed about things that actually we can't do anything about.
Can I start?
If you want to.
Yeah, I'm quite stressed about my business. It's not growing because of the COVID, and I want the situation to get better and my business to grow. In fact, this is one single most worry that keeps me awake in the night.
So you're having trouble sleeping?
Sometimes, yes, when you wake up in the middle of the night, the first thought that comes in the mind is business is not doing well.
So what are you in control of? What can you change, and what do you need to get help with?
Yeah, we are able to do whatever things are in our control, like approaching new clients and then trying to develop into new activities. Whatever that is in our realm of control, we are doing, but the outcome is still not up to the expectations.
And that's the key, isn't it? That often we have an expectation that sometimes, is maybe in the reality we're being hard on ourselves. So I think the situation with COVID makes all of us vulnerable in our businesses because of the financial climate. But actually, perhaps we need to think about being happy with the clients that we've got and servicing the clients that we've got amazingly, and not putting so much pressure on ourselves to grow in this time, rather maintain maybe. So I guess sometimes our expectation causes some of our stress because we want something that is perhaps not achievable at this moment, but could be in a few months' time when things improve. So maybe all of the things that you're putting in place now will cause a huge spike in 2 or 3 months' time, but actually may not get you the results that you want immediately.
Yeah, I agree. But what is complicating the situation is even the existing clients are cutting back, and everybody is in a very conservative mode, and nobody wants to open up the wallet because there is fair amount of turbulence and volatility and uncertainty, and everybody wants to wait and watch, and they are sitting tight on budgets. Nothing seems to move, with the new clients or with the existing clients.
So what can you do then about that? What's in your control? If they're saying no, what's in your control?
Yeah, like I told you, we are doing everything that is in our control, approaching the new and existing clients with some sweetened offer.
So you're adding value.
Yeah, with the better discounts and stuff like that. And the results are not commensurate. What we are expecting and what the client is willing to do is not matching, and that is where the problem is. Whatever we can do, we are doing, like offering better service at the same price or offering the same service at a cheaper price, and giving other incentives like delayed payments, etc. Still, they are not moving.
But you're being very proactive, so perhaps you have to let go of that and focus on things that are going to make you feel inspired and peaceful, rather than thinking about this isn't working, it's not having the result I want. So perhaps it's something about a mindset shift and what you think about those things rather than the actual reality.
Yeah, that is a very good suggestion. But what happens is that you are at a point in your life where your income cannot tumble down. We have got commitments and we have got certain level of expenses for which you need to generate income. Okay. Now, if that money doesn't come, then your basis of survival, existence, and a peaceful life gets impacted.
I agree with you, and I think that it's really challenging at the moment. But I think the reality is that everybody is in this same situation. So your kind of your basic living expenses, housing, and all of that sort of thing. That I'm not sure where you're based, but here in the UK, we've got breaks on payments for things, and bounce back loans, and all of this kind of additional support. But I feel your pain. I'm in a similar situation here. However, I'm choosing not to focus my energy on that, because if I sit and worry about all of the things that are going wrong, which there are plenty of things, I can assure you, it takes away my creativity. It takes away my innovation. And so I stop looking for solutions, and I'm focused on the problem. And so it's counterintuitive. And I know that, when you've got a fixed amount of income that you need and it's not coming, and you can't see from the forecast how it's going to come, that there has to be an element of surrender within yourself that allows you to let go of the situation, and to focus on the creativity and innovation that you potentially could create. So I don't think I'm going to solve that for you, as in get the money in your account, but I can certainly assure you that worrying about it is not going to change that situation. You have to shift your attention, otherwise it just takes you lower and lower. And I don't know if you remember the story I was telling of the gazelle, that the gazelle in fear turns around and runs back to the lion. And actually, when we are fearful, when we're anxious, we sometimes miss opportunities, we miss things, because our mind is functioning at in a toxic and lower level, and we're panicking. So I can only encourage you to go back to a place of peace, regardless of what the circumstances look like, because you never know what could turn around and what could happen.
Yeah, I get you. By worrying and by stressing out and becoming anxious doesn't improve the situation. Okay. What you need is concrete action, or generating some alternatives, for the income. Sometimes you need to think out of the box, look at other options that you've not hitherto thought of. You were always running within the circles of your influence or competence. Perhaps it is time to think outside the box, outside the circle, and look for opportunities. Maybe they may open up plenty of solution, meaning opportunities, not only for the current problem, but for your future survival as well,
Yeah, and it sounds like you are doing a lot of things. Like you're not, lying in bed and with the duvet over your head. So it sounds like you are making those steps. But I guess, as human beings, I think we all often want to be in control of situations. And I think this COVID situation has just shown us actually how fragile we are as a human species, and that actually we're not really in control of anything. And that there's two ways you approach that, really, isn't there? There's that kind of what I was talking about earlier in terms of keeping the peace and keeping moving forward in creativity and innovation, or we get consumed by our fears, and even the reality of not being able to meet commitments, and pay salaries, and pay yourself, and pay your basic living expenses is really frightening. It's really scary, and I think that we can spend our time really worrying about that, but actually it doesn't really change that situation. That's the truth.
Yep.
So what can you accept then that you can't change at the moment? What do you need to accept within that scenario?
You try and do whatever is the best you can. And then, like I told, maybe I'm looking at other options which are not in my familiar territory. Probably spread out your risks by partnering with others, by collaborative efforts, so that if the new venture doesn't succeed, you're not 100% exposed, and there are others who can absorb the shock. Some such things you need to come up with, because without the hard currency in hand, the life is not moving forward. Okay, come whatever you say to yourself, how you psychologically soothsay what is happening, the reality bites you. Okay, so if after doing everything nothing happens, then you know what you got to do. You see, the thing is that then wait for the things to turn around, you know.
Yeah, well, you've got your mental real estate. You're in control of your mindset. You're in control of your thoughts, and you're in control of how you respond to those thoughts. And so that I guess there's something about introspection and you know, being able to manage your internal space and work on that. If there's, you know, if you're doing everything that you can from a practical business perspective, the only real thing that you're in control of is you know, what thoughts you choose and how you respond to those thoughts. Does anyone else have a topic in their stress bucket that they want to talk about? So that was my final micro step, really, is to make some time to think about actually what is it that makes you feel stressed, and to try and find a specific time of the day or a specific time of the week to just to kind of give yourself that inner space, because I think we often repress our thoughts and we repress how we feel about stuff, and that really influences kind of, you know, what we think about. It's where our power comes from, and so to give a space to be aware of that and to understand what's going on, I think can really help you to think and act differently. So you don't have to spend like large amounts of time on this. It could just be like 5 minutes a day, you know, you set your timer on a phone, or just, you know, a part of your week. But try to give yourself and the things that you're pushing down, the repressed thoughts and the things that make you sort of fight, flight and freeze and influence your thoughts, try and give them a space. And I think it's clear that there is no kind of ABC to this, that there is a reality of having to do some work, which is really uncomfortable. And actually the unconscious is so big and vast, is that you don't know what you don't know. And until you give yourself some space to think about it, I think that it becomes, you know, an area that's quite unknown. So I guess I want to know, like, how do you self-care? Like, how do you make time for yourself to kind of stay in that preventative place, to take care of your relationships and your connections, to take care of what you eat, to sleep well? What do you do to self-care? How do you nurture yourself? Any thoughts on that?
You can even write in the chat if you don't want to talk about it. Yeah, or you can unmute and say.
So I appreciate that this stuff can bring up difficult thoughts for people, and so I just want to give a space really to reach out. You can reach out to me privately. I have included a so with this talk I will include some additional resources on sleep, because I think that's a key thing that people suffer with when they are stressed. Also some talk with experts on remote working. I've put a Pilates, a mindfulness session in the resource pack as well. And there's also a podcast on sleep, so you can listen to that. And so maybe you want to have a look at those resources in your own time. I'll share the links with Chetadri. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Martika. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, please unmute yourself and ask. And one thing I would like to ask is about kids. You know, in this situation, they are the most, previously it was always go and smile, talk to a, talk to a stranger. I mean, with the parental presence, then make that friendship. So they have been, I mean, we are trying to do certain things which were so important for us previously, that you have to be nice, and now just on the surface level, but still they have to go through so much of limitations, like stay home so much of the time, no school. So how does we, and that is a stress for us as parents as well, and it does affect the work life also. So what is your take on that, if I can ask?
Yeah, I think the homeschooling scenario and the whole children's scenario is a real issue for kids. In that resource pack, I can add the expert that we talked about homeschooling and the impact kind of psychologically on children. I think it's really important to create routine for them. In however that homeschooling routine looks, because obviously if you're working and managing homeschooling, it can be challenging. And I think that I've seen a real variety of homeschooling. So some, the kids are given the work for the week and they're kind of left to do it. Other schools have done like online classes that are kind of at set times. So I think that there is, finding the routine that works for you and your child and sticking to that routine is really important, because I think the structure of school with starting at a set time and having breaks is really key. The other thing I would say is around play and how you're creative about homeschooling and incorporating a bit more play into that. I think that children really learn a lot from play, and one of the challenges for kids, going back to school and with all the social distancing actually, is that we're designed for connection, and it's natural to want to see your friends and play with your friends, and having to be 2 meters apart, or whatever the guidelines are where you are, is really challenging for kids. And so I guess it's how you have those conversations as parents. And I was talking about the stress bucket earlier, and that we have different buckets, and that actually for your kids you are their stress bucket. And so giving them a space to talk about their feelings is really important. And they often won't, they probably won't be able to articulate in the same way as an adult does, but they'll be frustrated or acting up a bit, or a bit despondent, you know, however that comes out. But I really encourage you to think again creatively about how you, you know, you bring homeschooling to your children, but also how you incorporate play. And I think that certainly here we're allowed to go out in open spaces, in parks and stuff. And so how much you incorporate kind of being outside and, you know, outdoor activities where they're doing stuff, or alternative learning like cooking, and even, you know, playing computer games. I know, you know, some parents don't like their children to be on digital products too much, and you know, that's quite wise. But I think there are a lot of games that children can play online and also with their friends, you know, like on Xbox and that sort of thing, and really, you know, factoring that in and having time. But I think the reality is that it is going to, especially in young children, change the way humans connect longer term. Does that help?
Thank you so much.
Any other thoughts? One thing I would just say on sleep, because in the last discussion that we had around kind of financial challenges is, you know, when we start to get stressed, that our sleep gets impacted. And one of the best ways to improve sleep actually is around, you know, being able to get outside. That the natural daylight really helps us to sleep better. And so if you can get out for more walks or be outside more, actually you will improve your sleep. And the other thing is around digital products, like being on the phone and stuff. I'm really guilty of this. I go to bed with the iPad or the phone, and actually the blue light in the phone, you know, it sends a message to our brain that it's daytime and that we need to wake up. So if you can stop using digital products, like at least an hour before you go to bed, that can really improve the quality of your sleep. So I would, if you're struggling with sleep and struggling with your pattern of sleep, getting outside more for movement and for daylight, for fresh air, and not removing digital products, from the bedroom, really will make a significant difference to the quality of your sleep.
Yeah, very true. That's I think, you know, often ignored, but that's one of the most important aspects of the whole, you know, day that will drive. So
I think as well, like, you know, the problem with technology is that we can always be switched on. I mean, I certainly have all of the notifications on my phone, and, you know, emails, and I'm quite tempted to check stuff. You know, if it pops up, I will often read it. So it depends on how disciplined you are as a person. But, you know, if you're looking at work stuff right before bed and it's stressful stuff, it gets you back in that, you know, it releases the adrenaline and the cortisol again, and you get back in that state of alertness. And so, you know, anything that you can do to avoid that is really helpful. And the other thing, I guess, is social media. You know, if you're watching news updates all the time, and, you know, things and notifications are coming through on Facebook or LinkedIn or, you know, wherever you go, it can be quite depressing. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment that's quite, it's not very uplifting, is it? That certainly doesn't make me feel happy to start the day, you know, watching the news. So, you know, we're in control of these things, and we can choose what we think and what we allow into our thought space. And so I would say, don't start the day you know, watching the news or engaged in activity that's not uplifting, or that's not you know, putting your mind in a good space. Any other thoughts, questions?
Hi, Marteka.
Hi.
Yeah, as well, yeah. So Like it's completely opposite in terms of like the time I work. Regarding what you said about like going outside during daylight, like I work in the opposite time, so it's like evening going to like 12 or 1 a.m.
Mhm.
in the morning. I end work like that. That's gonna really affect the sleeping pattern.
Mhm.
Like how do you think I should like just to have a good sleeping pattern and all that,
So
since it's opposite in my end?
yeah, I mean, the thing with the body clock, you know, the circadian rhythm is that it responds to light. So I think it's helpful to have, if you can, to have like blackout blinds, or you know, when you go to sleep, that the room's really dark, and that you can control the light in terms of, you know, waking up and stuff. That if you're going to wake up later, that you know the room's still dark. If you can't do that, I think a really kind of helpful thing, and that a lot of people do when they travel a lot, is that they try to have the same wake up time and go to bed time. So even if that time's not in kilter with the rest of, you know, the household or the world, if you like, as long as you're keeping to that rhythm. So often shift workers that work nights, for example, and you know need to sleep during the day, you need to pick the times that you go to bed and wake up, so you create some kind of structure within the no structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does.
So I would recommend that you try to you know, if you wake up later because you're working later and then you need the time to relax after you finish work, if you're going to sleep around, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning, let's say, that you go to bed the same time and wake up the same time every day, that you set an alarm and you do it as if you were, you know, going to a 9 to 5, but your version of it.
Mm, okay, okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
So does the quality of sleep affect if we are like train ourselves to sleep from 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. maybe, or 8 a.m. So does it have the same effect as if somebody is sleeping from 11 to 6?
I think that you know, everybody's different in their sleep patterns, and you know, some people need 8 hours sleep, some people manage on 5. But you know, there's not a formula. I guess it's what helps you to function. The body does, the natural body rhythm, the circadian rhythm, works with the light. So you know, our bodies tell us to go to bed when it's dark and wake up when it's light. That's the natural rhythm. However, you know, we don't live in perfect circumstances. So you know, if you can't go to bed you know, in the night and wake up in the morning because you shift work, or you know, whatever's happening, you've got a small baby, you know, you need to find a pattern that works for you, because the body likes to have patterns. So if our pattern changes every day, I think that's where we get into problems with sleep. If we're going to bed and waking up at different times every single day, that's where we get confused and we can get into a state of insomnia and sleep deprivation. So just try to create a rhythm, you know, however that looks. And you know, if you have access to blackout blinds or to be able to make the room dark, you can actually trick your body to think it is night, but you need to keep that rhythm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
In the pack that I'm going to send you a link to, I've done an interview with a sleep expert, and he's given us a resource actually. So if you watch that video, he explains this really well. And the resource is there's a CBT program, and there's 21 experts that we had in a 3-day summit. So there are a number of talks there. I've given you, I've taken some of the content out to give to you as part of this talk. And then if you want to access the rest of it, I've given you a really discounted price of £37, but it's got all of the downloads in there and access to all the resources if you guys want to invest in that.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else has any question?
I mean, are there managers and on this call watching this, people that line manage other people?
Yes, there are.
Because I think one of the key things as well, if you're a line manager, you know, and looking after the well-being of your staff, of your team, is also becoming sensitive and becoming aware of, you know, if people are kind of getting into that stressful state, and just being able to have a conversation about that and being comfortable to have a conversation. I think often the workplace and our work colleagues is a really important resource and important relationship that we have. I think many people now, you know, we're home working and working remotely, realise actually the connection of the workplace and having that support system, how valuable it is. So I really encourage you, if you're a line manager, if you you know, look after other people in your team, to really kind of be aware of this, and don't be afraid to, you know, have conversations and check-ins about well-being as part of your kind of, you know, I don't know, your meeting structures, whether you meet with your teams regularly or not, but don't be afraid to incorporate you know, some of this wellness stuff into conversations, because I think it's really helpful when people know that they can have those conversations. You know, as I talked about in the presentation, that sometimes, you know, there's a real stigma around mental health, and we often think about mental health as mental illness. And so I think it's really important to be able to have those open conversations and shift the narrative into a more preventative space. And a more kind of, you know, actually we all have mental health, and this is how we stay well. So I encourage you to have those conversations.
Yeah, Dr. Matika, I have one more question. I mean, are there any abstract measures to, you know, measure how strong you are mentally?
Yes.
So
if you, I'm going to give the link to you guys after this. If you put in your details, your email address to access this resource, and the ones that I was telling you about, I've put in there a couple of different resources. There is actually like a stress test, and it will give you it's a clinical diagnostic tool, and it will give you a rating in terms of where you're at, so you can see that for yourself, and then it will give some suggestions on how you can improve that.
great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I see Amujuri Vishwanath, you have raised your hand. Please go ahead, ask your question. Do you have a question? Okay, I guess he just wrote great in the chat. So
Yeah, he's on mute. I'm not sure. Yeah,
he can unmute himself.
I have a question.
Hi, Raj.
Yeah, the point is how much of a role the auto-suggestion and positive thinking play in times of stress and anxiety?
Again, it's like, you know, resilience it's cumulative. You know, if the thing is, if you're really burnt out and stressed, and at that point you start to try to be resilient, it's like you're kind of drinking from an empty well. Whereas if you build your resilience when you feel well, you're already kind of half full, if you like, so it's easier. It's exactly like diet and exercise. If you want to lose weight, it's much easier to lose a few extra pounds than it is to lose 20. And so it's all about that kind of preventative angle in terms of building up enough in the bank, if you like, to be able to draw on it from a rainy day. Saying that, sometimes in life, curveballs happen. So coronavirus, a bereavement, a relationship issue, problems with our children, and we're not in control of these things, and this impacts our stress and our anxiety. So I think that the more aware we are of our own stress bucket and what's in it, and the more we create a space to manage that within our intrapersonal space, I think the easier it is to manage difficult situations and stress. When we don't have anything there, when we're empty, I think it becomes harder, because actually our stress bucket's really small. So the bigger your stress bucket, the more resilient you are.
And how do you think the religion or prayers help you in times of distress? Can it be relied upon?
I think it's very important. My personal perspective is that in my own life I've experienced prayer that works. So my perspective is one of that. If you don't believe, I think it's a harder place to be. But even neuroscience is starting to prove that prayer and meditation changes our energy. It changes the vibrations in our body. It puts us into a positive state. So it's not just a wishy-washy idea. It's neuroscience, and we all have a different way to go to God. So or not. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's something else. But I think that having faith gives people hope, and I think hope is a very strong commodity in building emotional resilience.
Yeah, here we have the question. How can we manage our stress and situation to peace? What are the steps to take to avoid stress? I think he joined late. This is so, yeah.
So I will give the resource. So we've recorded this. I'll make sure that goes into the pack, and then you can watch that. And also it gives you like a 21-day stress awareness challenge. So there's different things to do in an email every day. So a quick tip would be to write down some positive affirmations and focus on that for 2 minutes in the morning when you wake up. So start the day with an affirmation, a positive one.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, Vishwanath, he's again raising hand. Please, you are unmuted. I don't know, there is some technical issues, but I think you have got an idea. And yeah, so.
Yeah, okay. We just answered that one. I saw in the chat box, how can we manage our stress and situation to peace?
Yeah, one last time. Any more questions, comments? Okay, if not, then thank you, Martika, for such a wonderful presentation, information, things to ponder upon. And I mean, we are just honored and love to have you. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and all these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to finish with, like, you know, perfect love casts out all fear. So, you know, we can choose peaceful thoughts even when we are stressed. Thank you for having me.
Yep, thank you. Thank you for very informative and this.
So, Julian, what are the upcoming web?
Yeah, so we have our Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I mean, next week it's Tuesday and Thursday webinars, and you'll shortly know about the information for. Yeah, it will be the next webinar will be on our immigration, and that will be on Tuesday. So Tuesday, we have Tuesday the 16th from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Chatterjee, how would you like me to send that stuff to you, the link?
You can email me.